Well, good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Gary.
My guest today is Dr. Susi Dattenburg-Doyle. And on these podcasts, I'm trying to link the conversations and the characters in with chapters of my book, Eat the Pudding First. And one of the chapters that's written really to try and inspire people the most is the chapter called Anyone Can Do It, which is fundamentally about giving people permission, or letting people give themselves permission to take on tasks that normally they might think that they couldn't achieve. And in the short time that I've known Susi, I've been not only impressed but almost overwhelmed by the activities and career that she's had. I'm sure she'll introduce herself in a moment, but Susi is an educationalist. She's a fellow of the British and American Psychological Societies. She's got a PhD in psychology from the University of Heidelberg, I think. Is that right? And she started her career as a management consultant, but quickly moved on, and we'll talk about this, and had a passion, a hankering to help educate. And she started by building a school in Ghana, and built a community, really, which is now a website, I understand, that has a reach of over 7 million people. And just I was thinking about that on my way in this morning, driving in. 7 million people in a community is bigger than, if you think there are just slightly over 200 countries in the world, your community is bigger than about half of them. Bigger than half the countries in the world, bigger than countries like Finland or Denmark or Ireland. It's quite astonishing, really, and I guess there comes a sense of responsibility with that. Susi was also recognised, and during a coronation, which we must hear about, has become, is it Queen of
Quetta.
Of Quetta
in Ghana. It's a small area between Ghana and Togo.
Well, Your Majesty, welcome. I don't know whether to bow, curtsy, or kiss your feet. Welcome.
If you were African, you would definitely not show your back to me. So there's definitely very clear rules and regulations.
That would be culturally crass, would it?
That would be culturally crass.
To turn my back on you. Well, welcome, Susi. I'm delighted to have you on the show today. That's fantastic. Do you want to start off by just giving us a bit of a potted history and telling us just a little bit about your life and how you got to the place you are today? Because halfway through your career, you really had a sort of volte-face and changed direction completely and followed your passion as an educator. How did that come about?
So I think what defines me probably most is that I am really severely dyslexic. I'm not a little bit dyslexic, I'm severely dyslexic, which meant more or less that the German education system couldn't cope with me. And I come from a highly academic family, and that was just very difficult to comprehend. And I went in the end to school in England, where dyslexia was better understood and better accepted. But while I was in Germany, for exams, I had a friend I copied a lot from, and she kind of was very helpful, a friend called 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗡𝗖𝗧. And years later, I met her in a school reunion, and I said, look, I always copied from you. I would have not even made the first or second grade at all without you. Who are you now? What are you doing? And she said, it's a really funny conversation to have, because everybody in Germany knows me now, because I married a Ghanaian king. And I went, okay, I didn't know that. And he's actually a very famous king. He was the person for Apple phone 5. He was one of the faces for that. And she said, well, if you want to do anything good, start setting up schools in a local community where there were 20 children. It was an existing school, but it was 20 children under a tree, which is always 20 children under a tree, because that's the size of the shade a tree creates. And so it's very rarely that they're bigger. But I had made quite a lot of money as a management consultant. I studied psychology because I did an aptitude test, and I did very well on it and got unconditional offers for psychology. And I thought I might as well do that.
So this isn't your average school union. You go back and you meet somebody who you'd respected and who you felt perhaps had given you a break all those years ago.
It was very strange because everybody she was not popular at school, and everybody in the school said somebody in the school became queen. Who is she? And I said, she was in our class. And they said, oh, really? Can't remember her.
And
it was a very
And were you searching? Were you searching for something? Were you unhappy, or were you bored in your role or do you think you'd reached the end of your time as a management consultant at the time?
No, I was very successful. I was sitting on the board. I was basically I was mentoring, and the only person who actually published a lot of the mentoring I did for him was Ted Turner and the Challenge America Sailing Cup. I was at the height of my career, but I was pregnant, and when I was traveling transatlantic every week. And I just couldn't see having children and that kind of lifestyle. It was my boss offered me nannies and unlimited money to continue, but I didn't think that was sensible.
So this wasn't necessarily something that you had a passion about before necessarily. There was some serendipity here. Something triggered something in your imagination that grew.
And if somebody, I believe in callings. I studied psychology because I did a very good aptitude test. I found that a calling, and I found this idea that somebody said, why didn't you build a school? I had made money. My children were probably 8 and 9. I had time to leave a little bit, and I thought I'd build a school. Now, building a school it really is an interesting concept, because most people build a school, they build a building, and that's difficult enough if you're in the outback. But a building is not important. You have to build a community, and you have to build a school. You have to have a headmaster and bathrooms and computer rooms and windows and sports teachers. Sport didn't exist in the Ghanaian curriculum. Art didn't exist in the Ghanaian curriculum. How do you recruit a teacher for that? They didn't have lunchtime meal services in the Ghanaian school. How do you recruit somebody for that? And how do you explain a community that this is actually in your advantage? So my work was all the time as a psychologist of changing the attitude. And in the end, what happened was that the community of 20,000 people, and still is, everybody over, let's say now 35 is not literate, and everybody under 35 is now. So the whole community is still active, and the school still wins prizes. I don't know which level, but prizes, it's active. It competes as being one of the best schools in the area. It wants to succeed.
So just to check my understanding, you not only had to find a way of building the school, I'm sure they don't just come in a box, like an IKEA table, but you also had to do a sales job on the reasons why people should become literate and why they should become educated. Were they not bashing at your door, gagging to be taught?
No, not at all. I mean, so first of all, with building a school, every brick was handmade in the village. And the money at the time in Cadiz was in billions. The currency was in billions. And to get the money into the place, I had to have carrier bags full of money. And I had to have a porter just to carry the money bags to bring them. In terms of money, it was thousands. But in terms of currencies, it was billions. And I had to do accounts, and they had to be correct in order to be precise of who's done what. So the pure accountancy aspect of the work was similar to the Bank of England. Not the same value, and the majority of the people didn't want their girls to go. I mean, the girls, they wanted to get married at 12, and they wanted to harvest the fields beforehand. No, I had to encourage them, and a lot of the work done by the teachers was extreme to get them into school, but maybe that was necessary to achieve a solid community where everybody in the end went to school.
And how long did it take from having the germ of an idea to set up the school to actually the doors opening and children going through the doors with books and teachers?
The school was already there, but from 20 children to 1,000, it took about 10 years.
Gosh.
And there was also a career school next to it, which taught people how to become nurses and how to become computer programmers and seamstress. And the school then had a teaching training college attached. And every year we built another 3 rooms. So it was a big thing. I mean, it's big enough for Ghana to see it as a foundation.
And if people watching this are thinking about getting involved in a a very ambitious project. What advice, looking back on your own experiences, what advice might you give to others that are perhaps at the start of their journey?
Well, I think the most important thing is to get started. And the next is probably not to be afraid. I mean, failure in between happens, setbacks happens, and I don't think they're very important, the setbacks. I think you have to stay to what you want to do, and satisfaction doesn't come from what other people see or don't see. It's what you see. So the work, when I was telling it to, I didn't spend much time explaining it to others, but if I did, they always just thought I was mad. But you cannot explain what you do remotely and the difference it makes. Nobody can relate to it. You have to be pleased just for yourself that you've done it.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we talk about the risks associated with setting up businesses, the water always seems cold, to jump into. You talked about starting at a time in your life when you had a financial buffer. You'd already been successful. I talk about wanting to encourage people to start businesses when they're young, or to start projects when they're young, before necessarily they have the burden, if you like, of perhaps a mortgage or school fees to pay, or responsibilities to family or children. So I'm keen to encourage teenagers to start businesses, kids that have got the kind of street smarts. What they're doing might not even be legal. They might be stealing car radios, but they have all of the guile and the street smarts to be entrepreneurs and business people if they can be legitimized. And I love to think that society can wrap a structure around them to help legitimize their antics and turn them into businesses. I guess the hard thing to do is to give everything up when you're in the middle of a career where you do have a lot of responsibilities. So I guess one lesson for people is to wait until you've got a buffer, or go early if you ask yourself what's the worst that can happen.
Well, I think part of my decision, so I felt I was going to pay back, and I kind of started the school. But in the meantime, I was successful as a management consultant. I mean, when I left the job, it hit German news. That's not common when people at 30 leave a job, that this hits the news. So I was successful. And I thought, okay, I go back as a psychologist. And I was offered jobs at the basics and working my way up. And I just thought, I'd rather work for free than working under conditions where my past was not accepted just because I had children in between. I said, the gap I had of 10 years of not working doesn't mean I've lost my style. And I decided I'd rather do something for free than do something into a system which doesn't respect motherhood to the way I think it needs to be respected. And integrating women back into society is done in a very unkind way. And they thought, I was desperate enough to get the job and take it anyway. And then they said I would be promoted fast, which would be every 5 years if I'm doing really well. And I said, I'm 40. Why would I want to do that?
It's interesting. I mean, you've single-handedly changed so much about women's education in Africa. And I was reading, so when I was born in the 60s, there were about 2 billion people on the earth in the 60s. There are nearly 8 billion people.
Amazing, isn't it?
In the earth now. There's been spectacular population growth, too much population growth perhaps for the planet to contain. But I read recently that if you educate women, they tend to have less children. And the children that they do have, they see more opportunities for the children and themselves. And we're at a tipping point now where perhaps the world population is just starting to come into decline. Some people believe that we've peaked already. Talk to us a little bit about the hope that you've given Africans, and specifically women, by educating them and starting by making them literate as a foray then into setting up their own businesses and following successful careers.
Well, I think overall, if there's one thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, it is equal rights for women. I found the whole thing, my personal experience, quite. I mean, I'm had I been a man, my life would have been very different. And so I find equal rights super important. Most of the people who work with us with RED are women, and I find that, and I push them. But as a queen, I'm allowed to make decrees, which is such an interesting thing to do. And in 10 years, I made two, but only one is really relevant. And the one is that in my community of 20,000, you're not allowed to get married before the age of 18. And which is against Ghanaian law. This is the law I put down, and my community obeys it. So when I go there, they say, you're not allowed to get married. They say, my queen, I know I'm not allowed to get married before I'm 18. And
well done.
But now the Ewe community, which is 70 million people, they have put that as for the 70 million people of the Ewe tribe, EWE, they have made the decree for all of them to not get married before 18. I feel there are two aspects, as to having children early or whatever. But what, as a psychologist, almost frustrates me the most is that they don't have a right to finish their childhood. Childhood and growing into adulthood takes minimum 18 years. And to just cut it short at 12 and discuss it as a moral issue, it's not about the moral, it's about the right of a woman to be, to reach adulthood before she takes any decisions. I found that is essential. So the impact on this one decree has not been very strong.
Massive impact.
Massive.
What was the other decree, dare I ask?
Well, the other decree was to tell the government, no road, no vote. And I said to the Ghanaian government, if we don't get a road to 𝗟𝗓𝗧, there will be I will tell my community not to vote for them. And we did get a road. So now the community is connected by road.
Good. That's it.
But that was a very, I don't even know whether I could have, as a decree, keep it on. But I did make that a statement, and outside 𝗟𝗓𝗧, wherever you could see, there was a big sign, no road, no vote for 𝗟𝗓𝗧.
I can't think of better recognition than they gave you from you went through a coronation as a queen. Tell us how that came about. I mean, that's the ultimate recognition, Susie, isn't it?
It was the ultimate surprise. So I went back to I was actually planning to go back to Ghana to inaugurate another school, and I got loads of mails from my the paramount kings and the head of the tribe. I got loads of mails from them and saying, you must bring your children and you must bring your husband. And I said, well, they have no visas and they're all at school. And in the end, they said, you must. So I took, my son was at boarding school and he turned up in his cricket kit because the rest of the stuff was in the laundry. And my other son was not continuing with his fencing career, but my daughter was too young. She didn't even know where she was going. And I said to my husband, go to the airport. Apparently you get in without a visa. And the airline said, you can't get in. And then the president said, these people are coming in, and if you don't let them in, I'm here talking to you. These people will be on the plane without a visa. So then they picked them up, and I said, this is really very bizarre.
Getting the VIP treatment.
Getting the VIP treatment. And I thought, what? I mean, we are inaugurating a school, but it's not the first. And then we were allowed to stay at the local hospital, which hospital is, we were staying in the best building in the area. And then the next morning was picked up very, very early, and I said, this is so strange. And then you go through a very long ceremony. So the women of the village pick you up. They undress you completely, which is a very novel experience to me. And then they soap you and treat me and massage you. It's all so bizarre. And by the time it was probably 11 o'clock, and I'd been through this loads and loads of ceremonies, they kind of dressed me. And I came outside, and the whole community of 20,000 people was there having a street party. And then it's a very long sequence of public speaking and services and ceremonies, which ended in them saying that I was now the queen of the area. And it's a hereditary kingdom, so my daughter is going to be the next
Is
one.
it? That's interesting.
At which point my daughter ran away because she thought my mother is dying. What's happening? and then he was picked up. But if you look at the pictures of my coronation, I don't look attractive. I look stunned and very hungry and tired. And
well, you'd had buckets of water thrown over you that morning. And,
yeah, it was at the bizarrest day of my life. And then I ignored my title for several years.
Why did you do that?
I just didn't know what to do with it. And then the head of the 𝗟𝗚𝗦𝗧𝗘𝗡 tribe called me to Noche and said, I've given you the title to work with it. You better get started. And since then, I'm in the fold. I speak to the kings regularly. I'm on their Facebook group. And African society is always twofold. One is government and one is the king system. The king system is actually the people who install changes in Africa. So if you have a government making rules and regulations, this is very important, but this doesn't mean that it's adapted to the areas of cultural. Every country has different cultural diversities. And so it's the cultural head who decide for their community whether that is something they should take on. And so I work a lot with the kings. That's why this decree about not getting married before 18 is a decree which is endorsed by the kings. That's why it will hold.
That's great. That's fantastic. So I guess with the honour of that, you're now feeling there's a responsibility that comes with that to do the right thing, which will now pass over to your daughter. I hadn't realised that. How does she feel that she's going to be spending a big part of her life in time, hopefully not for a very long time, doing a similar thing and being on a similar path of righteousness?
Well, I don't know. I mean, she runs a gallery on African photography, which is doing really very well. It's all over. She studied the history of art, African history of art, and so she does that now. And she was 3 years ago. She was also called by the head of the tribe, and she had to introduce herself. And she was endorsed as doing it. And I think she now realizes it's going to go her way. It's a female seat, so it has to go to my daughter.
Let's move on a bit then, Susi, because they say from small acorns grow mighty oaks. You've taken that experience in a town. You've increased it to 20,000, 70,000 people, but now you've pushed out your. Let's talk about your teaching website. And the community that goes with it, that's now built to 7 million people, which embraces the whole of Africa now and beyond. At what point did you realise that you could scale it up in quite the way that you have?
Well, I was in Sierra Leone during the Ebola outbreak, and I read what the World Health Organization wrote as a leaflet to inform people about how to handle Ebola. And I remember thinking, my community doesn't understand any of that. They just will not understand any of this as being helpful, inclusive of the helpline being in Atlanta. And I said, they would not call Atlanta. So I thought, why don't I didn't know much about Facebook. Why don't I write an article of how I would write it? And I know my community understands it. And a friend of mine had a Facebook account, and I just thought, send it out, let's see what's happening. And within a week, 70,000 people read it and said, oh, thank God, you explained to us what Ebola does and what I can do and how to wash my hands. And, for example, one thing the WHO made, it showed a tap. Well, nobody in Africa has seen a tap in rural areas. They thought Ebola came out of the tap. And, it was completely confusing to them. So for them, the washing is normally at a river. So you adjusted it to them, and I thought, why don't I then start writing complicated? So the right for education is, in every sense, intellectually high, but linguistically easy to follow. But the concepts...
That Facebook page was the start of 𝗟𝗦𝗡𝗏 in effect, was it?
That was the start of the 𝗟𝗏𝗡𝗏, yeah.
Amazing.
And I just... so now I work with various universities. I probably trained probably 500 people of how to write so Africans understand it in English and French. I have at any stage chapters in various African countries and at Oxford University writing articles for us. And our followers are 70% have A-levels or degrees. All of them are entrepreneurs. All of them, 1/3 is female, 99.9% are Africans. What else can I say? They speak English and French. All our articles are original. And the direction we're going to take is from more academic work to getting people into jobs. So up to till December last year, I paid for everything myself. I think my opportunities financially are limiting to the opportunities of the company. So now we are helping successful companies successful companies who have proven that what they do works. We scale them up and into the African context. So we support companies who do online financial training, or we do them setting up biogas plants, and I feel Africans have the right to be on the table and have the same business opportunities that we have.
And I know you're not doing this for the money at all, but are you managing to monetize the 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 site enough so that you can keep on growing it and keep on providing the content that you need?
I would say it's possibly just running even.
And how are you doing that? Are there people that can come and access the community with products or services if they're appropriate?
Yeah, so I get offers every day. Most of them are really not suited in many ways. We don't do politics, we don't do religion, we don't do selling of products. But some of the products we come across are obviously super interesting, because I think every African should have that opportunity. And one company, for example, who I work with, they've just been in the Frankfurter Allgemeine as one of the top products to be useful for Africa. And we are the ones who promote them across the continent. So I spend a lot of time researching the products we get offered. Decline more, so I'm not tempted by money, but I'm tempted by good products, and I'm happy to scale them up.
Again, I think that's a great next step for the community, but it does make you the kind of moral arbiter, doesn't it? It starts and finishes with you, whether you think it's morally good or bad, whether it should go on the site or whether it shouldn't. And there's again a responsibility that comes with that, but there's also a future. Will this eventually go into a trust, or whose hands will the importance of those decisions go to after you when you decide to retire?
I really don't know. I think you're right. I think there are very few people who are truly not motivated by money, and I think it needs to go to somebody who understands the continent and sees it that way.
Do you think that's likely to be one person, or do you think that's likely to be a group of trustees, or would it be safer in the hands of more than one person, I suppose is what I'm asking?
Oddly enough, do you remember I said I would like to ask you these questions? So I really would like to ask you that question, because you've done this before me and I haven't, and I need to learn very fast to what I want to do next on that.
Well, I think what you've done is incredible. I'm in awe of what you've done. I think what you've done is fantastic and so much more important. I can sit on this sofa and interview lots of people that have scaled businesses and talk about the formulas that they've used. And I think what you've done is unique and is incredible, and still has more than one chapter to go in the future, especially if your passion now is to turn educating people into working people. Just remind me of the statistics. What's the unemployment rate in Africa? Is it something like 80%?
Something like 80%. That doesn't mean they don't work.
And that doesn't mean they're running their own small holdings or trying to feed their families. But as we describe, unemployment is incredibly high in a society where we're becoming more robotic.
Yeah.
So a lot of the manual tasks are going out of the workplace. So we need to educate people and then get them fulfilling jobs that will be part of the careers of tomorrow, which could be entrepreneurs, business owners, lawyers, accountants, creative people, artists. So the next link for you, I guess, is to turn that community into people that are working. And if you can do that, then perhaps the moral issues of having to decide what income you're going to get for the website, those challenges might go away. I can see those challenges being really difficult, though, because on one hand, you need to fund the growth, and on the other hand, you don't want to be pushing people's products and services that are inappropriate.
At the moment, I've only started doing it since this year, and
I wasn't trying to duck the question, by the way. I'm just trying to think it through.
I think it is difficult. At the moment, the only advantage I have is that I get offers every day. So turning away a lot of offers is, I get that many offers that I find it easy to. I'm not nervous. I'm not in a tight spot. I think long term that will change. But
you could have a committee, a kind of enterprise committee that filtered those, or you could have some standards or some rules, some criteria that these products or services would need to fit that you could publish, so that people don't approach you with inappropriate goods or services.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, not a manager, and I really think we're now at a size where somebody needs to manage it, and where it's not, the volume of work that I do is just too much, and I drop balls, and I think it would be better to work as a team.
It's interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs I speak to, and some entrepreneurs that I coach, are really passionate business owners. They're entrepreneurs. They've got great ideas, and they don't necessarily like giving up control, because it's their DNA that built the business. It's their DNA that made the business successful. But what a lot of them do successfully is to put in a COO, a chief operating officer, a doer, somebody who's good. There's an old expression that the difference between management and leadership, management is straightening the deck chairs on the Titanic rather than driving the boat. But a good COO needn't be like that. A good COO could be your sweeper. Could be somebody that you trust, who's got the business acumen to run a business, leaving you to be still the figurehead, the chairman, if you like. Although let's not get tied up with titles. But then you'd have somebody actually running the nuts and bolts of the everyday business, keeping the website alive, keeping the community alive, keeping the content coming through at the rate that you think that it should do.
So most of these works are done. I've got a big team in Ghana who does it. I definitely am not a control freak. I'm actually the opposite. So giving up control would be something I would find a pleasure. That would, so I don't have that. I think the only thing I really feel very, very passionate about is this, that the site keeps having deep respect for African culture and little hints like, did you know, or can I tell you, which are these little hints of somebody not knowing. I'm allergic to it, probably because as a dyslexic, there was always a little bit of, let me tell her something. And probably that's it. The thing I created is that it has deep respect all the time. But one of the top jobs I get asked for, and I really like it, is finding people. Outsourcing is now a huge opportunity. Africa is full of educated people. A lot of jobs can be done online. They work long hours. There are now companies in line with whom I'm partnering who do contracts abroad. They also do payment systems abroad. And one thing we have defined is what we call 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗘𝗡, which means while I'm not selecting who you should hire, I can shortlist possibly who's not suitable for the job, which means that the group of people you will interview is manageable, because the amount of people who will apply for jobs is too large.
What I'm seeing working really well in society at the moment, this kind of new word of collaboration, and the collaborations that people are doing. You can't do everything yourself, and generally clever businesses are run by experts in their field, specialists in their field, and it seems to me that there's a great opportunity for you to collaborate with firms that are specialists at finding jobs for nurses or accountants or people who code. Fantastic community called Girls Who Code that I've been following in America, that have now touched over 3.5 million girls and taught them to code, which is fantastic. And I'm even this Thursday going to a collaboration event between an artist and a restaurant, where the artist has been, it's a kind of 2 and 2 makes 5 thing. And it strikes me that you could have a whole series of collaborative partners who are experts in their field that could then help people find work or go on to further education or go down specific streams of education where they can learn more specialist skills.
I so agree with you. I feel, I think I'm confident in my psychology, and I get it where Africans are at. And everything else, I would love collaboration, and I would love companies to say, we're interested to do it, and I'm very open for that. And I think it should be there, because it should be scaled up. And there's a continent who wants to be having the same opportunity as everybody else. At the moment, they don't.
Susie, if you could wave a magic wand, just let's say take us forward 5 years, what do you think that whole 𝗟𝗓𝗏 community might look like, feel like, sound like?
Loads of people with jobs. And they come on our site and saying, if I want a job, and if I want an opportunity, and if I want other education programs, and if I want to have something which I probably can't just only get in Africa, but I need in collaboration with the West, I come to the 𝗟𝗏𝗏 website and find the right contacts of equal-minded people.
So you're really clear about turning the educated into the employed?
Yes. So I would say 80% of all comments I get on our site, it's as high as that, would be, I'm educated, so what do I do now? I've got amazing degrees, what do I do now?
Talk to me a little bit about the banking system in Africa and the flow of funds. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of talk on crypto community as being a way of passing money from one continent to another without paying fees, for example. I'm not talking about the speculative aspect of investing in crypto, but the ability. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, but everybody who has a smartphone has a bank account in their pocket. How is the African monetary system catching up, and what does it still need to do to allow these people to have the freedom to send and receive funds?
Okay, the first one is, of course, that all the Francophone African countries have to go through a CFA, and that means they always lose on currency exchanges anyway, which is a shocking unfairness after France leaving the it's so little talked about. It's really shocking. The next thing is the transfers is unbelievably expensive.
Companies like Western Union are taking up to a third of the funds for making the transfer in fees.
Unbelievable, and that everybody watches it and lets it happen is criminal. Both of that is criminal. And the companies who now take on all the money are the mobile phone net providers, because you can send money, basically sell mobile phone units from one account to another account. Again, they make huge amounts of money. I think the whole African continent could strive for business people who just do fair deals. I'm not saying be naive and make no money. I say make money, but don't think 20% is the right cut on that kind of thing. And fair offers are very scarce. I don't think the Chinese give many fair offers, and I don't think the big company providers at the moment give fair offers, but there is a growing community of people, typically young entrepreneurs, who handle things just in a fair way, because they know in the long run they will get huge businesses, because people notice this is a fair exchange rather than a quick fix of.
Have you come across any African entrepreneurs who set up their own crypto coins or exchanges?
It's very busy. And certain countries are now changing the country currency into crypto. And I think crypto is a great one for Africa.
And if that doesn't come soon enough, you've got a community, you could create one yourself.
Yeah. And I've been approached by loads of companies to do crypto in Africa. And I'd love to do it. I just need somebody to. It's very difficult for me to choose what is the right cryptocurrency. If an expert would help me through that, I would definitely know how to make it active on the continent.
Well, there's a calling for anybody who might be listening who's got that degree of expertise. As well as talking about your own story, which I'm fascinated around, I could talk all day about this. I'm keen to kind of pass some knowledge to people that might be listening about how they can be successful too. And if you were giving advice to your 25-year-old self, or your daughter, or somebody else's son or daughter, what advice would you give them now in terms of embracing a project to be successful now that you've done it?
I think just do it and not give up. And above all, not be nervous of things going wrong. I mean, I always thought, and I remember from very early on, I will never starve because I will just do whatever job and that will pay my food bill. And I would never have thought this would bother me. And if it bothers my friends, I don't care about that either. So this not having fear of the social stigma in any direction, I think is very helpful. And keep going. I mean, there's a calling, and I think life is about doing what you want to do, and not about doing what's expected of you.
I did some work a little while ago.
Similar to you.
Well,
similar to you.
I did some work for the University of the Arts, and I was chair of the Enterprise Committee, where we got to decide to try and help the artists, alumni of the University of the Arts, Centre of St Martin's, London School of Fashion, to turn their ideas into business. And I found that a lot of the students and teachers were preoccupied with the IP. They were preoccupied with the idea, and everyone was looking for the next greatest idea. Whereas in actual fact, I think it was more about execution than ideas. It's finding something that you're passionate about, and then putting all of your effort into the execution to make it happen. And in my experience, it doesn't matter whether you're a pizza delivery company or a courier company. It's just about doing it better than your competitors, obsessively so. It's not even about being good in business. It's about being better than the people that you're competing against. So I often encourage people to think less about the idea and more about the execution. Yes, it's really important to feel passionate about what you're doing, because it's going to preoccupy years of your life. Somebody said to me once, if you really enjoy what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. But I'd like to make that point about execution.
I agree with you, but I think Western governments make it seriously difficult for entrepreneurs, and every rule and regulation makes it more complicated. And most entrepreneurs are good at something, and of all the other, I don't know, being human resources, the law, the accounts, they're large aspects of work. There's nobody good at everything, and now you're especially in the Western world, your company is not defined by the success it creates, but by the failure, by the weakest link of your work. And there's so many complications on that front. And so if governments would like to encourage more entrepreneurs, they definitely have to make it easier for entrepreneurs because they can't afford to have a human resource department or a legal department or an accounts department. Or
there's no doubt in the 40 years I've been in business, set up my first business when I was 21, there's now a quagmire of risk and regulation issues to wade through. And it seems as though the government's kind of penalising the job creators. We've seen a recent rise in national insurance, and we have to live in a society, in a world where we're encouraging the job creators. We're encouraging people. It's not a dirty word to be an entrepreneur, to be successful in business. You're paying tax, you're creating work for people, but it is getting more and more difficult. There is risk. There's risk in setting up businesses. I've run 3 public companies now. I delisted a company a few years ago, partly because I felt that you couldn't run a small company in a public company environment, the cost of the risk and regulation. And there is risk in everything. There's risk in driving cars. If we wanted to stop all road accidents, we could stop everyone driving a car. Take away all the cars. There'd be no fatalities at all. But there's risk in everything.
It was kind of, anecdotal story of my brother who runs a successful company. And about 10 years ago, his senior people and he all bought a house at the same time. And he realized that all his employees could get a mortgage and he, as the owner of the company, couldn't, because the employees are covered by employee laws and owners of companies can't, which I think sums it up.
Well, we're also now in this post-COVID world, living with 400 billion of debt in the UK that our children and grandchildren will have to pay for. I guess one of the things that's come out of COVID, though, is this remote working and this home working. You touched on that a little bit earlier, and that could be fantastic for highly educated African people. The ability for them to work remotely. If there's good tech, if there are good internet connections and they're happy to work in the time zone, then there's presumably a fantastic opportunity for
There's also
African
a fantastic opportunity for new creations. For example, if you take a lot of elderly or lonely people, they can now go on the internet and, Germans can learn English or they can learn African drum or, there are loads of weird things you could batik in Africa. There are loads of aspects you can now learn remotely. And before you could do the remote thing, but what you can now do is also do the payment for it. And so I don't know what hourly rate they get, but you can now actually send the money back and people are prepared to work remotely and be personal assistants or, certain forms of therapy you could do with keeping elderly adults mentally active. There's loads of these jobs which can be done online, and they're not. In some of online has advantages and disadvantages, but they're also pros, and not just cons.
It's become apparent while we've been talking that you've only just scratched the surface. Really, there are so many opportunities. How do you work out where to put your time and where to put your effort?
I'm not doing it very well. It's too much. I need to have collaborations, and I need to have people who they need to have the same vision, which I don't think is rare, and because if you don't keep the same vision in the company, you're always defined by the weakest link. So you have to be with similar visions. But I'm not a control freak. I'm the opposite. I have no problems of giving it up. And I would love to give it up to people who add their knowledge and their expertise. And I think all I can do is help and say in the African context that will work or not. I think I have a good feeling for that.
But you've proved in your career so far that you can take businesses from one phase to the next. It seems to me you've run 2 or 3 legs of a relay race, and now there's another leg to run. There's another incredible amount of opportunity ahead.
I really think so. I think there are millions. There are so many people who look for jobs and opportunities, and there's so many niche interactions people are looking for. And all of that, a lot of that can be done online, and it I think there is an unlimited opportunity.
I've monopolised a lot of this talk, really talking about your achievements in Africa. But despite all of the challenges, let's come back to the fact that you've done something extraordinary. You've done something exceptional. You've done it day by day, week by week, month by month, to the point where you stand now on top of a towering community that's still pregnant with opportunity to come. And I look forward to staying in touch and perhaps helping you achieve some of those goals, Susi.
I'd be delighted. I honestly would be delighted.
Well, for today, thank you very much indeed. I think you've had an extraordinary career, which has clearly still got some to come. Congratulations and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure.